Here we are. Thank you so much for joining today. We're live on LinkedIn, but we're also recording this on Twitter, and it's going to be saved on YouTube if you want to watch it later or send it to someone. I wanted to share some fresh information that I've received, and I have to credit the Startup Board Academy here in Switzerland for allowing me to understand more about the role of a startup board member or scale up board member. There are more risks when companies are creating their processes and setting up their standards than when we're dealing with big companies that are already well established and have already a clear policy to mitigate risks. And so we're going to talk a little bit about managing crises that might arise. If you are on a board, you might see things, going south, and being ready to act fast will be crucial at that point. So this is a live for people who are already board members, or yes, also for those of you who want to be board members. May it encourage or discourage you. I'm not sure which one of those it will be, but I definitely want to make people aware of the risks and the advantages, I suppose, to being a board member, which is different from a board advisor or a non-executive director. A board member has more of a legal and financial responsibility, and being part of. So one thing that I really did not understand, but now I do understand clearly, is that there's like three layers. You have the shareholders, you have the board members, and that's a body of one. And then you have the exec team. And those are three separate layers. They don't mingle. I mean, they do mingle, but they don't. They're three different legal entities. And if you disagree with someone that is sitting on the board with you, you can just go and sue that person or attack them or threaten them in any way, because you're one. The board is one legal entity in itself. So I'll dive deep into this, and please interrupt if you have any questions. Let's just start the show. So here we go. Startup board advisory roles, what it entails, what are the responsibilities. So first of all, what is a board member? Just to be clear on the definition. It's like I said, it's different from board advisor, right? A board member is a member of the board of directors. They're part of the, you have a chairman or a chairwoman leading that legal entity. They're not part of the exec management team. These are staff members, employees of the firm. A board member is not. That's why he's independent and able to, be unbiased. You have, they're not employees of the organization. They are providing unbiased oversight, as I mentioned, and they're usually paid for their services. So this is not a voluntary, donation of your time. And you can be receiving a combination of cash and equity as a board member. Here I put board member / advisor because, these are different roles, but legally speaking, they're different, but in practice, they might not differ too much. So they help with specific business issues or opportunities. They're not necessarily meant to develop business, although they can. So key responsibilities, yes, we will think about strategic direction, maybe helping define the business model, auditing, because you're supposed to be independent. So you're probably better suited for that kind of task, and evaluating risk and assuring compliance to some extent, but not always. I mean, if it's a startup, maybe they don't have like a compliance team dedicated to, and that would be, they would rely on the board members to help with that. And So performance enhancement or management is also a role that they will play to ensure that the C-suite is doing what they're supposed to be doing. Governance, and that's like a really big part of their responsibilities, and more specifically ESG reporting. I think there's a lot of expectation there for board members to understand those standards, and not just the financial but also the non-financial ESG reporting. And then connections in the industry, like I mentioned earlier in the previous slide, you might be expected to help develop business. Those are the key responsibilities, as you can see here on the slide. Let me know if you have any questions. But so these would be expected of you if you have those skills, you would be a good candidate for that kind of role. In terms of, I have heard a few questions that I wanted to make sure to answer, like, okay, why do companies need to hire a board member? Is it really necessary? And, what type of companies are we talking about? Do I get paid? How many days do I need to work? Because I have a full-time job, I'm not sure I can handle all of that extra work. So here I answer some of those questions, and also in terms of the remuneration, because we don't want to be doing this for free. So, well, board members, they play a major role in company auditing, governance, risk assessment. They help the exec team stay on track and account properly to their shareholders. Remember, we have 3 different layers, right? The shareholders is one block, board members, and then the employees. And by that, I mean the exec team. So what type of companies hire board members? Well, it's common to see NGOs posting for board member roles, but it's also a growing trend in a number of startups, scale-ups, SMEs. They do require help. And it's also true that board members are increasingly younger and more diverse, thankfully. And in terms of expectations, you can expect to work anywhere between 8 to 25 days per year. It can be more if you're managing a crisis, but this is kind of the, I would say you can separate like an afternoon per week. Maybe the math is wrong here, but yeah, depending on how successful the company is or not. Time required will vary, like I mentioned, and in larger organizations, then you might need to spend more time meeting with the board and traveling with the board and events with the board, and so that can be different depending on which company you're supporting. In terms of salary, you don't necessarily have a salary, but you can expense your hours, right? So, and there again, it can be anywhere between, 10K to 50K a year, depending on your contribution. And yeah, it's a combination of cash, equity, goods, services. It depends, but don't do that for free. That's my advice. The role that you the role you are appointed to, the size of the company, and the sector will influence all of these metrics. But this is just to give you a little bit of a north. Let's talk about common problems that may arise, common crises that you can expect to encounter. As the board member of a startup, there could be issues with regards to the business model, if it has changed or failed, or if they're trying different versions of the business model, if they are going for like a membership, but they were selling products and now they're, positioning themselves differently. In many ways, I think the business model is something that pertains to the board member. Potential customers who don't want the solution that is offered or the product. If there's a mismatch with the market, if we're not aligned with what customers and clients are asking, if there is a problem with the a technical problem, and depending on your expertise, depending on your background, you can also support the development of the product, but not in a very hands-on kind of way. Crisis may also happen if we're not able to pivot or not able to scale the business, the service, the product, not able to evolve or change with the demands and the trends of the local market, and not able to execute on what we expected to deliver. Lack of cash, lack of funding, and also maybe the loss of a key player who was instrumental for the success of the company, whether it's someone who holds IP or relationships or access to a given market. And so the types of crises between investors and founders, I mean, they're quite common, and there will probably be disagreements that will end up falling on the laps of the board members for them to solve. It's usually going to be short-term versus long-term vision, the strategy, prioritizing, and also understanding the numbers. So you better have a good grasp of governance and basic accounting skills. Not that you have to produce any of those reports, but you will have to demand them and read them and interpret the numbers. Execution. So, yes, the CEO is in charge, but the CEO is appointed by the board. So, and the performance of the CEO is also monitored by the board. There are sometimes overlaps and conflict of interest, but this is illegal now since I think January 2023 in Switzerland. I don't think you could have like a CEO who's also a member of the board, but you could potentially have someone at the board who has to act as a CEO interim. I'll have to check on that. And then lack of love from the angel investors, the no refinancing, no or little cash to support the startup, which is usually funded but not profitable at this point in the early stages of the development. When there are unmet expectations and misunderstandings between the exec team and the investors, it can fall also on the lap of the board members for them to sort of mediate those conflicts, change of roles, and finally exit if you are successful in selling your startup. This is also going to go through the board. Crisis management. What can you do to manage those uncertain times? If you are sitting at a board, you can rebalance your levels of, intrusiveness versus hands-off. How much do you want to be aware of what's happening internally? How much you want to understand the numbers? How much you want to maybe even freeze budgets if you feel that's needed, especially the budget that you may allow the CEO to spend with no approval. I mean, there's usually a certain number of, I don't know, 200, 300, 500K that the CEO is capable of spending without intrusion from the board. So that's something to be mindful of if cash is short, right? Adjusting the expectation of timing, because when when things get out of control, I think you need to intervene within hours, and it's not something that you can, oh well, we'll talk about it at the next board meeting next month, because the issue being your name is on the line. You are legally responsible for this entity in which you are a board member. So you have to set up a crisis team or a plan for such. You have to assign responsibility and be ready to not pack and go, but to communicate the strategy or the new way of operating, to freeze budget, to make urgent payments if necessary. And in ultimate case, like I said, you could perhaps consider acting as interim CEO or CFO or COO if that is required, depending on the extent of the crisis. Discussing, so when it comes to bankruptcy, when it comes to shutting down, there are a few things that need to be considered. So the debt, and here it's important to remember that in Switzerland, even if you file for bankruptcy as a startup, as a company, you need to still pay social benefits to the employees that you had. That is not going to be forgiven, and the bill comes under your name if you're sitting in that board, and it will be split equally amongst the board members. Responsibilities of the board, you have to really be clear on this, and I think this is not understood clearly by all board members, and this is why I wanted to prepare this content for you today. Be really clear on the actions to be taken for each step, and usually the actions are, they are pretty urgent. When things go south, they go fast. The risks, like I mentioned, in terms of IP managing, the employees that you're going to dismiss, the shareholders that you're going to have to satisfy with an explanation, and the clients that you're going to disappoint. All of this can fall on your lap. Expectations of the judge, the bankruptcy officers, and they will definitely talk about social benefits with you if that's not paid on time. So there's also, as a reminder, I think it's important to highlight that the board needs to monitor the solvency of the company. When you're joining a new board as a board member, you need to make sure that, okay, who are the founders? How are we doing financially? Is this sustainable over time? Where are we going? Can I back this, right? You're not backing it with your money, but with your reputation in this case. And yeah, you might have to also spend some money on companies that are not sustainable if you don't protect yourself, because you're legally accountable for the success of this startup that you're sitting on the board of. So if the company is threatened with insolvency, the board of directors needs to take measures fast and apply for a debt restructuring moratorium. And they need to act fast and have a plan of action, which is not always the case. So I wanted to add this little reminder here. It's not something that can be delayed, because you have, as a board member, responsibilities, at least here in Switzerland. This is how it works. So for you to be able to fully develop your board member role and be successful, you're going to have signatory rights. So this is the last thing I want to add here, it's not the least, it's actually really important that you understand that your name must appear there together with, whoever has signatory rights. Maybe it's the CFO and the CEO and whoever else is listed under zefix.ch. This is where you're going to be able to just type in the name of the company, and there you see all the people who are legally responsible for this company, and you have to be listed. You have to have signatory rights, and it has to be like a joint signatory right. Like, you shouldn't be signing a loan for money to be released. It has to be like a joint, you plus whoever else. You wouldn't want to be the only one to sign. And if you see that this is the setup, you must also address that. You should always have two signatures to release money, pay for urgent payments in case that is needed, freeze the budget of usually the CEO or the exec team as a whole if that's needed in times of crisis. And like I mentioned, social charges, if you're filing for bankruptcy, if they are, they need to account for the social charges that will not be forgiven, at least not in Switzerland, even if you're bankrupt. Salaries, yes, but not the social charges. Downsizing if required. So this is also going to be, managed here by the board somehow, or in combination with the exec team. Selling IP if needed, if nothing else is left, and shares to business angels if they still are interested in the company that you are that you are here trying to liquidate. So yes, so social charges, are they easy to predict prior to insolvency? Yes, absolutely. And I can hook you up, Simon. Thanks for your question. This is very like they really are surprising, these social charges. We never really factor them, but they do matter a lot, and the bill will come even if we file for bankruptcy. So I'll answer also in more detail through a private message on LinkedIn. And well, yeah, I think that's it for today in terms of content. I don't want to scare you. I just wanted to give you a little bit of warning as to what matters the most when it comes to sitting in a board. I think a lot of people are excited about these opportunities, but not everyone understands the extent of the role. It's a complex ecosystem, and I think the more the company lacks structure, the bigger the risks. If you're sitting, on a board, I don't know, at Nestle, you're going to be a lot safer. It's a lot more predictable than if you're sitting on a board of a startup. But startup boards are a lot more fun, more challenging. You're going to learn a lot more. You're going to be taking a lot more risks, and it's probably also I don't know if it's more time consuming, but it's also more energy demanding. But if you're going to start, I think start there. The rewards are essentially going to be, it will accelerate your career if you're trying to change roles, change industry. If you're trying to go for a bigger job with more visibility, sitting in a board will be, will really accelerate that growth. So I do recommend you to do that if you are director level and above. I think it's something that you should consider. there are many companies that are, promoting those board seats. I think the one that I recognize to be the best here in Switzerland would be the Startup Board Academy. They offer courses, they offer lots of guidance, whether it's in legal, finance, crisis management, case study, managing angel investors. And so they really go deep in equipping you to be the best board member you can be. But yeah, again, these roles are not so easy to find. It's a bit tricky, but they do matter if you're looking at a shortcut to a more senior position, managing partner, a VP, CEO. Having this experience will definitely raise your credibility. So I think that's it for today. If there's no other question, the next live is going to be about a book called 10x is better than 2x. So that will be, I think, in a week from now. I'll communicate this on LinkedIn, and I hope to see you all there. Thank you.